Welcome to the Funny Books and Firewater podcast. Each week these idiots pair cocktails with comic books. You can find the cocktails, drinking game rules, and playlists on the blog at funnybooksandfirewater.com. While at funnybooksandfirewater.com, you can also find a drinking game rule to play while you listen to each episode. You can follow us at Firewatercast on Twitter, and Funny Books and Firewater on Facebook and Instagram. This is episode 153, The Fade Out, part of the Brubaker and Phillips team-up month.
Wow, everybody in the same, well, not in the same room, but everybody in the same recording for the first time.
Yeah, close enough. In a time, but here we are, reunited again. It's the Fuck Force 5. The Fuck Force 5, huh?
Fuck Force 5. Fuck Force 5. When did that come up? I wish I would have known that. We could have made t-shirts, the Fuck Force 5.
Well, Fan X is coming up.
That's true. That's very true. And if we can get Mr. Jason out there, we can, actually get everybody going. So,
Personally, problem is that's the weekend I have to go back out for training, so I may not be.
Damn you, Adam's employer. Damn you.
For more reasons that I can speak of on this podcast. So,
welcome to episode 153 of the Funny Books and Firewater podcast. This is the first podcast we've had everybody on board with since our 150th. So congratulations, guys. We made it 150. Hooray! So we have the long-lost Boysian who is in love with the great potato state. We have Mr. Adam.
Potatoes.
It's Adam. I've been fighting off a cold for like a week and a half, so I have an extra salty, smoky voice going on today. But yeah, I do stuff over with Big Shiny Robot. You can also find me sometimes at the Ford Tell podcast with Andy Wilson.
Hi, Andy.
And then occasionally over at Cinema Queens with Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Which, again, got derailed because of the whole, I'm at a hotel with 1 megabit internet service. Fuck boys. So it's not just us. No, it was I haven't heard the episode because it hasn't come out yet. We were trying to record, and I was all excited to go, and then it sounded like less. And like 5 seconds, so fuck it. So yeah, there's all that. Yeah, that's my life. It sucks. So.
Well, we also have hanging out with Bruce. I need a better intro than that because I have to introduce you first, and then I introduce Todd,
right? So
that we can have Jason Todd. But I'm trying to figure out how you intro them so that I can say them at the same time. But I'll figure that out later. But we have Mr. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason, unemployed writer in Los Angeles, and in keeping with the tradition of the last few episodes, give you a sneak peek of my previous work experience. So several years ago, I was the location manager for a feature called Susie's Hope, which was a movie about a young woman who survives a pit bull attack and ends up rescuing a pit bull who was abused and left for dead. And together they lead an effort for legal justice and protection for animals. And it's actually based on a true story. Yeah.
I've never heard of that movie.
You wouldn't have.
Okay.
There is no reason for you to have heard of that movie. There are a lot of movies made in Hollywood that no one ever hears about, ever. Cool. And then, of course, we have in Utah the world-famous surname of Mr. Jason. We have Mr. Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm sitting next to Mr. Lagavulin himself today because he's smoky and salty. Yeah. So, see that? See what I did there? So, hey, I'm Todd here in Salt Lake. My job consists of pointing at things and telling people to do that. So
that's true.
It really sums it up. And then they're scared of me. Brian had a grand old time. He came to work with me one time, and he's like, "Everyone's scared of you, Todd." I'm like, "Yeah, isn't that shit great?"
It's funny. It was really funny.
It's amusing. They all think I'm much more terrifying than I am, and I'm like, I'm good with that. So I do this I'm a co-panelist on this podcast, and sometimes I do funny books and firewater. I sometimes do. English class hooligans as well with Brian there. And
hi, Brian.
Hi. How are you? Hello.
Hey, who cares about you?
I know. More importantly, your better half.
Yes, it's Amy.
Hi, Amy.
There we go. Yeah. Here I am.
Todd's other better half that he doesn't tell his wife about, we have Mr. Maya.
Hey, blah, blah, blah. Hey, y'all. I'm
Thanks
Maya.
for proving the point.
Yeah, exactly. When you're not listening to me here, you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Maya or Instagram at the Mr. Maya. But more importantly, you should follow my cat because she's so much more interesting than me. It's the Jonesy on both Twitter and Instagram.
Nice. And hey, I'm Brian. I'm a sound designer based out of Southern California, and I do a lot of shit that I can't talk about, unfortunately, because I work for large corporate clients that make me sign non-disclosure agreements. Hooray for non-disclosure agreements! Not that Jason knows anything about those.
Do you move sliders? Are sliders still a thing in your world?
Sliders?
For moving levels up and down?
We call them faders.
Faders? What's with this new shenanigans?
Fade outs?
I mean,
there we go.
Yeah, there we go. There's a tie. I don't know if I've called them sliders ever.
That's fair.
If not,
now I just want a plate of sliders, like little burgers.
I will say the most badass guy I ever saw was at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and there was this older gentleman just sitting at the bar eating sliders at Ruth's Chris while watching the game. I'm like, if I'm like him when I'm that age, life will be good.
It sounds like you're thinking about that shitty TV show with Jerry O'Connell.
Hey, come on! It was like an update of Quantum Leap, but not as good.
Everyone always remembers Quantum Leap, the episode where he leaps into the body of the gorilla, and he's just walking around the whole time in like a diaper.
Dude, that's awesome.
Really, that's like
I don't remember
everyone that bring up that show. They're like, oh yeah, remember when he was like the gorilla? I'm like, I remember.
All I remember is in the end of the beginning of every episode was him going, "Oh boy,
oh boy."
Yeah, that's all I really remember about that.
Who was like the computer guy? Who was like his little
it was like Max or Ralph or
something like that. He's just some fucker you wanted to hate on Battlestar Galactica.
I'm just going to refer to him as Jiminy because he was like Jiminy Cricket.
All right.
Hold on. Now I have to look this up. This is going to bother me.
On NCIS New Orleans, which that actor's on now, the Oh Boy guy. I wanted to say Oh Boy on that show. I never watched the show. I just wanted to say Oh Boy on it and be told he did.
Al. His name was Al. That's who was
very close to Max and Ralph. Very close.
Yes. They have vowels, consonants. We're almost there.
Yeah. It was just sort of like a generic name, you know what I mean? But, yeah, anyway. Well, cool. So, speaking of Hollywood, I don't know how that segue happened. We had a better one earlier and we destroyed it, so that's fine.
Faders.
Faders.
We are recording this episode on the day of the Oscars.
That is true.
We are actually recording this. It's true. And some of us are really interested in watching it, and some of us do not give a shit. So the Fade Out is a story of a writer in 1948 who wakes up to find himself potentially part of a murder of a Hollywood starlet. This is another one of our collections of Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and this is with colors by Elizabeth Brewster.
Breitweiser.
No, is that
Betty Breitweiser. Yeah.
Yes.
Breitweiser. Yeah. Elizabeth Breitweiser, who has started working with them quite a bit as well, and she, I think, adds a great amount to the work here. I'm double-checking on that date, because it says right at the very beginning.
It's 1948.
1948, so I was right. Okay.
Yeah.
So Los Angeles Fall, 1948. So does that seem like a fair assessment of what this is to begin with?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Todd, what is the myification of this book?
So the myification of this book, as I was looking at it, is not the subject at all. But as you look in the back of this book, it gives a price tag of $9.99/different in Canada. And that is just fucking awesome. So the answer to that, the myification of this book is different in Canada.
In Canada,
because that's just fantastic.
Oh, and I do. Well, actually, I'm jumping ahead there. Never mind. I'll wait till we get to final warnings.
But different in Canada. You've been warned, Canada. The show is different.
In Canada, this show is actually in French.
It's all frogs.
And we're actually very uptight, hoity British people who are speaking French. That's what the show is actually like in Canada. Just in case you're ever wondering.
I will say I saw Breitweiser and the old Budweiser commercial with the frogs that go through my brain. Breitweiser.
Right? Wiser. Okay. Anyway.
See, it all ties together.
It all ties together.
Dun, dun, dun.
And if we hadn't seemed like we've been drinking enough already, it's time for drinking games. Mr. Todd, what is your drinking game rule?
So my drinking game rule is, what did I call this again? I'm looking at this. Hold on. I liked my rule because it's my drink is the low life. Every time an individual is just a little too perfunctory and ready to do something shitty, go ahead and take a drink.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Jason.
Mine is called For Your Throat's Sake. Anytime a character takes a drag of a cigarette or cigar, take a drink. And I made that specific because if the rule was just whenever someone has a cigarette, you'd probably be dead.
You would die. Yeah.
It's like a Hemingway novel.
Yeah. It's true. Mine is called The Fog. Every time Charlie, the main character, has a foggy, drunken flashback, take a drink. And Mr. Maya, what is yours?
Mine's called The Cover-Up. Anytime a character alludes to or gives orders to cover up a murder or a scandal, take a drink.
Awesome. And then, of course, Mr. Adams, who I went last because it was the one that I wanted to use. I'm sure a lot of us had that exact same thought. So, Mr. Adam, what is your drinking game rule?
Mine's called You're Gonna Be a Star, Kid. Every single time they mention a real famous person, take a drink.
Which I thought about because they do name drop. I almost called mine Bob Hope just because of all the references to Bob Hope. But there are a few other celebrities in there as well. Cool. So let's take some votes as to whether or not we believe it is worth our listeners' hard-earned time, money, and effort to go hunt this book down and give it a read. This is also volume 1 of volume 3, just so that everybody's got a heads up. So we are not doing the entire story here.
Or it's available in one giant book.
Oh, is it really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, this is only the first 4 issues that we're doing. So, cool. What is your vote, Mr. Todd?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Mr. Adam?
Yes.
Mr. Jason?
Yes.
And Mr. Maya?
Yes.
And I'm a definite yes as well. I also recommended this book, so of course I'm going to be a yes. Anyway, cool. Well, so then, I mean, since we all recommend reading this book, I think we need some music to put on in the background as we read this. I am really proud of my choice, so I'm going to go first. It's the classic song Hooray for Hollywood, but it's the Doris Day version of it, which is kind of sultry and like espionage-y and kind of works perfectly for this show. Like, if you were to make this into a movie, I guarantee you this song would have to be on the soundtrack because it's kind of the perfect. You really listen to the lyrics of the song and you realize how much Hooray for Hollywood actually makes fun of Hollywood, which I never realized before until I was listening to that song. And it used to be on the background loop of a place I used to work. So I've heard the song, the classic version, many, many times, but this was the first time I'd really heard what the lyrics really were. Mr. Adam, what is your song for the playlist?
Mine is Celluloid Heroes by the Kinks.
Nice. Mr. Jason?
Mine is the Love Theme from Chinatown by Jerry Goldsmith.
Nice. Mr. Maya?
So mine is Ain't That a Kick in the Head by Dean Martin with, like I always do, a bonus song because it's actually mentioned in the book. The song Darn That Dream, and Ed Brubaker himself says he recommends the Billie Holiday version over like the big band versions.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Good to know. And Mr. Todd?
Mine's The Tinder Trap by Debbie Reynolds.
Which I don't know if it's already a band name or not, but that would be a great band name.
It is a good band name, isn't it?
The Tinder Trap would be an awesome band name. If we start a band, that would be like a really great band name.
It'd also be a good company that's like designed to lose money.
There's that too.
Right?
Wasn't that like Michael Jackson?
Ooh.
Whoa.
Dude.
I haven't done it in a while. I gotta try it.
Ouch!
Sidestepping that. Does anybody have any final warnings as to, before we let people loose to go give this a read?
Yeah.
It is for mature audience.
I don't have a warning, but our good friend Ed Brubaker, who wrote this book, does. I read it in issues, and I found this in the back matter of the first issue. It says, I debated whether to say anything about this or not, but since the language in this comic is harsher than in some of our other books, I felt it might be warranted this time. So here it is. The fade out takes place in a time when racism, anti-Semitism, and sexism were basically accepted behavior. It isn't the main thrust of our story, but if the odd line of dialogue shocks or appalls you, please understand that I'm painting a portrait of a time and place, and not all of it is going to be pretty. Hell, it's a noir, so it better not be, right?
Yeah. And
that is a very, very
there are also
depictions
of sexual assault. So, yeah.
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 There are indeed. So, just to give you a heads up before you encounter that. That's probably, unfortunately, it's probably a general rule. Well, no, next book doesn't have that. I was like, I don't think it does. Watch me be completely and utterly wrong. Well, cool. Does anybody else have anything else?
Nope.
Apparently not.
No.
Okay. Awesome. Then we will take a little bit of a break, allow you, our dear listeners, to go read this. So if you want to give it a read, which we all recommend you should, go ahead and give us a pause. Also, while we're taking a little bit of a break, there will be a nice little ad from one of our Hello Sweetie podcast partners. I think it's the Geek Parenting Podcast this month. I know our good friend Sarah is on that, and so is Tui. Who else is on that show? We know a bunch of people on that show.
Hi, Geek Parenting Podcast.
But yeah, so a bunch of our friends are on that show as well. So give that a listen, and we will see you on the flip side.
While we take a break, here is a message from one of our fellow Hello Sweetie Network podcasts.
When you have kids, it's almost impossible to find time to catch up on all your geeky obsessions. Comic books, TV, movies, games. We get it. Geek Parenting Podcast understands your pain, and we are here for you. We're geeky parents just like you, and we come together once a week to talk about what it's like to raise your little geeklings while staying true to your fandoms. New episodes every week. Find Geek Parenting Podcast wherever you consume your podcasts. Follow us on social media at Geek Parenting Podcast. Sorry, Stefan.
Okay, who wants to do the summary? Not it.
Not it.
Not it.
Mr. Maya! I like the game when I win it. I hate the game when I lose it.
Hang on. I need...
Sure, by all means.
Do.
You can tell who's paying attention.
At least let me get it all the way out this time before, I was editing another episode where everybody
I interrupted you last time.
Honor the rule. You complained about it, fine.
Yeah, it was actually fairly humorous. You have to wait till after fuck it, I'll do it. I didn't even get all the way through.
All right, so the fade out starts with our hero, Charlie, waking up in a bathtub trying to remember the night before. He's a writer in Hollywood in 1948. He's remembering the party and in bits and pieces because he is super drunk. Meanwhile, also just painting the picture of Hollywood back then with a bunch of sleeping around and drinking and booze and fights. And then he comes out of the bathroom and discovers that he's in, what's her name? Valeria Summers' apartment, and she's been murdered. She is an up-and-coming star in Hollywood. He then decides to just leave, wipes any trace that he was there. He doesn't think he did it, but he doesn't know who did. Then he goes to work. He sleeps on his couch at work. He's dreaming, trying to figure things out, figure out what's going on. We get introduced to a couple of characters. What's her name? Dottie? Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Dottie's the PR girl for the studio. And Phil Brodsky is the chief of security for the studio. He's an asshole. He's talking to Phil Brodsky Brodsky's letting them know they found Valeria's body, and it looks like she committed suicide, which wasn't the case when Charlie woke up. So he knows that the studio's trying to cover something up. He tells his writing partner, Gil, who has been blacklisted because of the
Red Scare, and so Gil is actually the real writer, and Charlie is basically the front. So Gil writes all the stuff because he's been blacklisted. He can't actually take credit for it, and therefore they have a deal where Charlie publishes it under his name, and they sort of split the money.
And then Charlie tells Gil what happened. Issue 2 starts off with them at Valeria's funeral. One of the other actors is pissed that they buried her under her stage name and not her real name. Gil shows up at the funeral. Charlie gets pissed because he doesn't want them to be seen together since he's been blacklisted. Charlie goes back to work. We just have more. They're trying to figure out how to shoot or reshoot around the area, not being there. Is this the issue where we get her replacement? Probably not. And that's kind of it for issue 2. It's just a lot of character stuff. Issue 3, we start off with learning about the head of the studio and the wild sex parties that he went to in the 20s with some cult or society or something. And kind of get how the studio started with him and the head of security. We get introduced to Maya Silver, who is Valeria's replacement, and her trash bag agent who tries to get with her and gets shot down. So Maya's agent goes to talk to Brodsky and says that some guy is back. He's been throwing rocks through his window and following him around. Maya had a great day on set because she likes being around, what's his name? Earl Rath. Who is a very likable, charismatic actor. She had a great day on set. She goes back to her dressing room, starts to change, and you find out that the studio head has a secret tunnel that goes to all the dressing rooms, and he just pops out of her closet, which I thought was really creepy. And she's like, oh, okay, fine, whatever, and takes her clothes off, and he's like, no, why would you do that to yourself? You look like a child. And then leaves. She goes home. Her husband, or her ex-husband, is there, and we find out he was the guy that Brodsky and her agent had paid off to leave and be out of the picture. And Brodsky shows up and beats the shit out of him, and they take him away, and she doesn't feel bad. And then issue 4 starts off with Charlie and Earl hanging out together. Charlie likes being in like Earl's little sphere of popularity. He has another little flashback where he's kind of piecing stuff together and recognizes a guy. What are they at?
The photographer, the stars.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand where they were before, but he's selling them pictures of naked girls. And Charlie notices a picture with Ronald Reagan and some other guy, and the guy looks familiar, and we get a sense that he might have been there the night that Valeria was killed. So they set up basically a PR date for the new actress with Tyler Graves, who had just broken up with Ava Gardner, and it's all a PR stunt. And Charlie's supposed to be there on a date that he I don't think he thought was a real date, but Dottie might have thought it was a real date, as we find out later. And they're there drinking, hanging out. Clark Gable's there. We find out that was it Charlie and Clark Gable were in the war together.
Yep.
Yeah. He goes outside. He's sitting by himself. Maya comes out and is like, "Oh, let's go dance." And they go back in and dance. Dottie's upset, crying her eyes out.
Typical woman.
Then Charlie starts trying to piece together. I didn't quite understand whose house was burning. Who was Stevie?
That was the photographer.
That was a photographer.
That's yeah, that's right. There's a fire at Stevie's house. Stevie is burned up inside. He sees a car there with the guy that he had recognized earlier in it, and then he goes to run over and meet him, and by the time he gets through the crowd, the car is gone. End of Act 1.
End of Act 1, yes. So it leaves this big, basically, question mark as
who's this fucker?
Yeah, who is this, and what does he have to do with all this stuff? So I don't know who wants to start talking about this.
Well, I had a lot of fun with it because this has kind of been this month, even though I haven't been on too much. I've been reading the books. I haven't read much Ed Brubaker, but his writing style is amazing, and I love the fact that this is just steeped in the old timey Hollywood making movies, and I love that kind of thing, movies like The Artist and stuff like that just deal with that kind of subject is something I'm absolutely in love with. So going through this, I had no idea what it was about. I really jumped in blind, and it was fun to be like, oh yeah, this is the blacklisting and all the nefarious dealings they were doing to kind of get their stuff put out there, and how you got the casting couch for all the women and this and that, blah blah. It was a very sexist, racist, horrible time, but it's still really intriguing. So it was really fun to jump in, see all this, and then the way also hence my drinking game rule was tying in real people. So it was, sure, we have all these fake characters in the story, but we're going to throw around Clark Gable and Bob Hope and everyone else. And so it was really cool. I liked it a lot. I can't wait to read. How many are there?
It's 12 issues. 3 books, 12 issues.
So this is definitely one I'm going to put on my list to finish the rest of it. And this one's free on Comixology right now.
We're all 3 on there.
I can look at it right now. Will you tell us what you thought about it, Maya?
I liked it a lot. I started, my first Ed Brubaker was Winter Soldier when he was writing Captain America. But then shortly after that, he started a little book called Criminal. And I was like, this guy is amazing. He was my favorite writer for a long time back in the mid-2000s. I'm like, I'm going to get this. And then it just kind of went from his creator-owned projects, and finally we get to the fade out, and he still doesn't disappoint. His most recent one we'll be doing later, and I will say that he still doesn't disappoint. But yeah, this I'm also a fan of this kind of era of Hollywood, even though a lot of shitty things happened. Just the kind of like feel of it, I've always liked. And I was thinking about it, and yeah, there isn't a lot of like funny stuff to this, but I was thinking of a movie that I want to see, or who I would want to see like make this movie. And I always kept coming back to Shane Black, I think, would kill it.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely, yeah.
What movie am I thinking of? Thank you, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. But yeah, if this were made into a movie, I think Shane Black could be amazing making this movie. But I want to finish rereading it. Rereading this trade and knowing there's only 8 issues left, makes me want to reread it. And I do also suggest, if you can, track down the issues, because a lot of the articles and stuff in this are and that are in the single issues are amazing as always.
Also, all 3 trades are on Unlimited. Strangely enough, though, the individual issues are not.
Thank you, Amazon.
Hey, Mr. Todd, what are your thoughts?
No, as I was reading through this, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang also came into my mind, but also did Hail Caesar by the Coen brothers.
Yeah, same.
So with Hail Caesar, it's very similar subject matter, but that one's a bit more tongue-in-cheek about the whole thing. Not quite tongue-in-butt, but it is tongue-in-cheek. Except for that one sequence, right?
Well, it's got a brilliant scene with Han Solo and Ray Fiennes.
It does. With all of that here. So it definitely establishes the era. So you've got the setting is so well put together, and it's well done, and it's and a little bit of LA Confidential is a bit going on with this too. So with those 3 things, and it's all mixed together, it's got a seriousness, and you've got Charlie, this main character, who just kind of moves on from one shitty thing to the next shitty thing, but his life is the shitty thing, as being this beard for this blacklisted writer, and he himself. He gets away with stuff because he's got the right kind of last name, for lack of a better term. And so everything else is happening. He's already compromised himself in so many ways before anything here begins, and it's just one more thing, and it doesn't matter. As he's watching this, and yes, he's got concerns, and you've got all these deplorable characters, but they're wanting the fame. They're saying this is how the game's played. You've got the one wife going, "Oh, I watched my husband get the shit beat out of him, and I really enjoyed it. Makes me a bad person, but I'm going to sleep like rocks tonight. It's great." And so, as you're watching this, it's somewhat despicable people all behaving despicably, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, are there really any likable characters in this?
I feel bad for the wife.
I was gonna say, but as far as the actual characters go, not like Clark Gable or Bob Hope or any of them.
Right, I was gonna say Bob Hope.
I mean, I definitely feel for Charlie, because he's what I like about a lot of the main characters is that they are sort of playing as foils to one another. So there's the blacklisted writer who is still writing, that's Gil, and then there is the professional writer who is unable to write, and that's due to his PTSD from being in the war. And I appreciate that sort of 2 sides of the same person identity. And you've got that with the actresses as well, with Valeria and Maya. And I think Charlie says of Valeria at one point that she is sweeter than she seems. And then as we get to know Maya, she is not as sweet as she seems. And it's a very, very nice switch on the 2. Yeah.
Also, as I was reading this, I thought of you a lot, Jason.
This is like my Thursday night. Yeah.
If Jason would have been in 1948.
What I also liked about Charlie King's up is like, oh, you've got a relationship with Clark Gable, the biggest star around. And he's like, yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that, is he really does want to stand up on his own 2 feet as it's coming forth. And he's not trying in a lot of ways. It seems to be, hey, I know Clark, therefore I'm awesome. And struggling through all of that. So he definitely has his own demons he's fighting. And then it ends on this expansion of this mystery of what's going on. So.
Yeah, well, I think him saying he sort of forgets about that is that he would actually rather forget about it, because he doesn't like thinking about the war and what he went through, and why he feel sort of inept professionally right now. Yeah, I mean, it's in reading a little bit about The Fade Out after I finished this volume, turns out there were a few interested parties in Hollywood who wanted to adapt it even before Brubaker had finished writing it. And just from this first volume, you can definitely see why, because it's a very classic introduction in a sort of hero's journey sense, in that you introduce the character and what his world is, but then you immediately shake it up and turn it upside down. And he actually does try to, at first, not sort of answer the call for his journey, and he tries to wipe all of his prints away and just walk away from Valeria's death, and then he is somehow still brought into it because he sees that someone is trying to make it look like a suicide and cover something up, and it's a really, really solid introduction where even if you don't like Charlie all that much, although I certainly do and I feel for him, you're definitely along for the ride because you can see that he almost has no other choice but to get further involved.
Obviously, I haven't seen trailer for a Fade Out movie yet. Do we know whatever happened to that?
Nothing that I could find. I will say I like the character of Charlie and Gil and the actresses. Yeah. Some of the supporting characters are a little one-dimensional, at least at first. And while that is sort of true, they are spot-on archetypes that fit the story and the setting to a T. The demanding German director, the fixer with a very clear either military or police past, and the sleazy agent, they all fit that tone and that theme just perfectly. And then there are a few other supporting characters who actually do seem like they've got a little bit more to them already, whether it's Dahlia, the PR girl. There's definitely something more there beyond just her liking Charlie. And then you mentioned it a little bit in the overview, but the studio head Victor Thursby and how he was embroiled in some weird Hollywood cult, which I looked up is actually a real thing. It's called the what's it called? The Blackburn Cult, or the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11. And it was a cult in the 1920s that had a lot of allegations of, not allegations, but there were a lot of animal sacrifices and sex scandals. And there was even a case where they found a dead 16-year-old girl's body underneath one of their houses, and they were apparently trying to resurrect her.
Jesus.
Yeah, a lot of really weird, creepy stuff. But the fact that this character in this story is a former member of that and thinks longingly back on those days is a really, really nice touch.
Yeah, and kind of messed up, but
yeah.
I just in general like this book. I think revisiting it, it's very readable. Like I find that Ed Brubaker is both. He has a nice flow to his writing, and it really sort of sucks you in. I had like the intention of like I had other stuff to do, so I was like, okay, I'll read this issue, I'll go do some stuff, I'll come back and finish it, and then I ended up sitting down and reading the entire thing in one shot because I just kept going. I'll just keep reading it. You know what I mean? I'll read one more issue. I'll read one more issue. I'll read one more issue. So like it sort of really pulls you along and drags you into this web that he's weaving, and I really, really enjoy it. I think I feel bad for it's not Charlie. Who's the drunk guy?
Gil's
wife. But I also think that I know, because I know more about her character gets developed further in the end, a little bit later in the book. That I think that's probably part of the reason why, because she's barely in it at this point in time. But yeah, I mean it's a fun. I mean, for a dark, messed up book, like it's a good read that really draws you through. I really, really love the art in this book. I mean, Sean Phillips, I think, just does amazing work, and I think that it, like, everything just feels really period. And the coloring, I think, is great. Like, there's a lot of really good things about this book. And I remember the first time I read it, I was like, "Oh, dude, Brubaker doing old Hollywood, like I'm 100% in," and it didn't disappoint what I was expecting out of it. So yeah, that's my general thoughts, I guess. But anybody else have anything else, or we'll go into cocktails?
Well, you touched on the art, and I mean, similar to the other Brubaker and Phillips stories we've read, it has a really good use of the stark contrast that evoke that noir feeling, and also the bright colors that don't sacrifice that noir tone, but still show a very vibrant world that exists in the frames. So I think it's really, really well done.
I also like, kind of in a very cinematic way, the as I call them, the fog flashbacks of like like it looks literally like an old like camera with Vaseline on the lens. You know what I mean? Is sort of what it looks like. Like it looks like it's something they would have done at the time frame to try to evoke that, at the time.
Yep.
The question, I guess, becomes, if you were to make this into a movie, do you make it in color or do you make it in black and white?
I would do color, with Hail Caesar doing it as well. It's a noir at the flip side. That's right.
I think what I would do is I do it in color, but I set up to be very washed out.
Are you saying Zack Snyder should be the colorist?
No, because you think of like, the first thing that popped in my mind was like Sin City, but at the same time, I think it would be better off with not just black and white with splashes of color, but if it was just a very dingy kind of muted colors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking Sin City as well, but more splashes of color. So you'd still have a lot of black and white, and then a few pops of color here and there, as opposed to just
like Schindler's List
once in a while.
Well, it's got to be that.
not quite as happy as that.
Yeah.
Or you just take it and throw a bunch of cartoons in and make Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2.
Because I'm thinking about like movies of the era, talking about like you've got your Hail Caesar and some of these others, and they are so that is just so colorful as they've like really embraced the golden. You say golden age. There is a very much a golden hue wash over that Hail Caesar movie, and it brings a whimsy to it that this one lacks. This is not a whimsy book by any means.
No,
there is no whimsy. There's no whimsy in Ed's vocabulary.
Ed Brubaker is never going to write a book that Scotty Young can illustrate. Like, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Probably not.
I think how fun that would be, though, if this was done with like Scotty Young illustrations. Jesus Christ.
Oh my god, it's so weird. For those of you not familiar, Scotty Young does really cartoony illustrations. He's currently writing, but not illustrating, Deadpool. So, for those of you who are not in the know on Scotty Young, cool.
There's a lot of really cool stuff with people's eyes in this, to where like you can almost see them like sparkle on the page, like when it's really dark, or like they just did a really good job of like making. Because most of the time you look at comics and like, people's eyes aren't exactly lifeless or anything, but this one they just seem to kind of pop off the page more than they do in other books I've read.
Yeah. Okay. I also appreciate that at the very beginning you've got the cast of characters, because it can be a little bit confusing to figure out who's in what scene.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true, and that's definitely very helpful.
I like to call that the Walking Dead effect, because a lot of people look very similar in that book.
That book, I'm always reading about 3 or 4 pages before I realize who's exactly talking. I'd be like, oh yeah, it's the storyline. Oh yeah, it's the storyline. If
it's not Rick, Michonne, Carl, or Negan, that's anyone else is hard to tell.
Well, because they all die and then they come back, and then like you can never really quite tell on any of that. So
yeah.
Well, cool. Let's do this then. Let's jump into cocktails. I know that mine is similar in name to Jason's, but they're different. So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and go first?
So mine is the Black Dahlia. And actually researching this, I found...
Oh, wait, sorry. I'm not similar to you. I'm similar to somebody else. Ignore me.
If you want to continue on. Right. So I found out that the Gallery Bar in downtown Los Angeles is actually apparently the last place that actress Elizabeth Short was at.
She was also seen at the Hotel Cecil, which is the basis for the American Horror Story season hotel. And also it's the same hotel that Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed at when he was doing some of his killings. It's a very weird, messed up hotel. They've changed the name of it, actually.
So anyway, but the Gallery Bar...
Sorry,
that's fine.
Weird.
So the Gallery Bar has kept this drink on their menu for the 70-some years since she died. And it is 3.5 ounces of citrus vodka, 3/4 ounces of, I don't know how to pronounce it, Chambord?
Yeah, perfect.
Which is raspberry liqueur, and then 3/4 ounces of Kahlua. Shake the ingredients in a shaker with ice, strain into a chilled cocktail glass, and then garnish with an orange zest.
Okay. Tasty.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Todd, what is your cocktail?
My cocktail is the Greta Garbo. And it's what it has is 16 milliliters of a light rum. You put in a splash of maraschino liqueur, a splash of lime juice, a splash of sambuca, or any kind of anise-based liquor you're looking for, a pinch of sugar. You dump all that into a cocktail shaker, fill it with ice, shake the shit out of it, and you strain that into a cocktail glass. So, yeah, it's got quite the zing and punch to it, much like Greta Garbo.
Nice. Mr. Adam, what is your cocktail?
So mine is called the Ruby Starlet. We usually take the zest of a grapefruit, you mix it into a quarter cup of sugar. You're going to grab a chilled martini glass, take a grapefruit wedge, rim the edge of it, and dip it into that sugar and grapefruit mixture. Then in a shaker filled with ice, you're going to add 3 ounces of vodka, 2 ounces of fresh squeezed grapefruit juice, 1 teaspoon of powdered sugar. You shake the shit out of it, and then you strain into that martini glass and garnish with a grapefruit peel.
Awesome.
Yeah,
yes. Now, mine is similar in name to Adam's, but is a different cocktail, now that I got that right. Mine is called the Starlet. It is also, when I was looking up Starlet cocktails, there's a lipstick color called Starlet cocktail, just in case you're ever wondering.
I was wondering about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it's your favorite shade,
yes.
Jason. It is 1 ounce of orange-infused vodka, 1 ounce of absinthe. They recommend Matahari absinthe. 1 ounce of Hiram Walker black raspberry liqueur, and 1 ounce of champagne. You combine the vodka, absinthe, and black raspberry liqueur into a cocktail shaker, shake the shit out of it over ice, strain into a cocktail glass, and top with champagne, and garnish with a raspberry. Mr. Maya, what is your cocktail?
So my drink is called the Starfucker. It's 2 ounces of watermelon pucker schnapps, 1 ounce of Crown Royal, 6 ounces or half of a 12-ounce can of Red Bull, and the recipe does make 2 servings for 2. Basically, just add the Red Bull, Crown, and the pucker to a shaker with ice, shake it, and then strain into a double shot glass.
My God, that sounds awful.
I'm watermelon pucker and Canadian whiskey and Red Bull.
And Red Bull. It's like you go to the ice cream thing and it's like, we have Play-Doh ice cream, and you're going, oh, yeah, I want some Play-Doh ice cream. That sounds like a good idea. And
I would totally get Play-Doh ice cream.
For the 3 people that order it, they would love the fuck out of it. But for me, it's just, it's so saccharine and I'm glad good for you, but
So something interesting about the book idea, I'm on the Wikipedia page. Ed Brubaker's uncle, John Paxton, was a screenwriter in Hollywood back in the 30s and 40s. And he wrote like Murder My Sweet, Crossfire, The Wild One, and On the Beach. So he has inspiration for this because his uncle would tell him stories of what Hollywood was like back when he was working.
Well, I was going to say,
I have Crossfire on DVD,
and I'm on the same page there, and it says his wife, which I guess would be his aunt, worked PR for 20th Century Fox at the same time, and also told him stories.
That's Dottie.
Wow.
That is, it's Jill and Dottie.
I now really want to spend Thanksgiving with Ed Brubaker's family.
That sounds amazing.
That sounds fascinating. Wow. Okay. Well, cool. Does anybody else have any final things, parting thoughts before we go into final grades?
It's in some ways, it's with Ed Brubaker. The previous books we've looked at is we very much had. Sorry, this is the 3rd Brubaker book, and yet tonally they've been similar, but yet there's quite their own things. It doesn't feel like I'm rereading Song of the Innocent or Last of the Innocent again with just a different name and nouns changed. And it's the same artist and writer, and yet they are as similar as they are to each other. It's very much taking on a new tone and a new dress and a new outfit as it's going through each one. And it continues to be thoroughly enjoying, and I'm becoming engrossed in it, but they are still unique unto themselves. And it's very much the Phillips Brubaker brand, but I'm not confusing one for the other.
Well, yes, because Brubaker is talented like Grant Morrison.
Wow. Okay, Lagavulin.
Fight.
I'm agreeing with you. I like it, Brubaker.
So
fantastic. Then let's jump into final grades. Our first grade for self-contained. This is volume 1 of 3 in theory. But what is your grade for self-contained, Mr. Jason?
F. If I had finished reading this an hour before we had to record, I would have continued reading.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that. Mr. Maya?
F.
This is the best F you could possibly get. It's like this F, no, we want to keep reading this. Okay.
So the recommendation would be just skip volume 1 and get the deluxe edition, which I think is like $29 on Amazon.
So I've had some pretty good F's, so.
well, good for you. Sure. Yeah.
Nice. Mr. Todd?
It's an F. And also, in their defense, the title of the trade is Act 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's very much saying, this is just part of it. But it's like, we know what we're doing. This isn't the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but also it implies with saying Act 1 that there is a final act, or like it's a 3-act structure. So it's not a forever and ongoing, which I also appreciate.
So what's interesting then, by the typical 3-act standard, that means that the next trade's got to be the fucked up one.
That's kind of true, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Mr. Adam, what is your grade for self-contained?
Well, I'm glad everyone else said F, because I was going to go with that. As much as I like the book, I mean, it only is the setup. So, but again, getting into it, you open the book, it's like Act 1. So they're not pretending to be something that it's not. And that's kind of the problem I've had with other books where the first one didn't really go anywhere, or it was like the beginning of like maybe like a 30, 40 issue run, where this is kind of more like a limited series. So that you can finish it all within 12 issues. And like I said, it's all free on Comixology, or $30 for the full trade. But yeah, you know going in what it's going to be. So you're not too surprised when you get to the final page and you're like, oh, I guess we'll read the next one because this doesn't answer any questions.
Yeah. Well, then I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon and say an F as well. Cool.
Peer pressure.
You know it.
Real quick, before we get to that, let me jump in. I'm still on the wiki for this. And I guess in the letters page of Kill or Be Killed, issue 12, which is a book that we're going to be doing shortly, Brubaker, is it the next one? I wasn't sure if it was the next one or not. Brubaker mentioned that he does have plans for a semi-sequel to The Fade Out that would share the setting and some of the supporting characters, but the plot would be completely unrelated.
Yeah, because you could have the same fixer and same PR people, doing another thing in the story, and like you could have like the, that writer, happen to be passing by and saying hi to, somebody or whatever. Like I could see that totally working. You could actually build a whole world around this old fake Hollywood studio. It'd actually be pretty cool. So
yeah,
well, cool. Speaking of Mr. Ed Brubaker, for writing, what is your grade, Mr. Jason?
Mine is an A-. Minus only because I think the part where Maya got tripped up in doing the overview, there's a part near the end of the 4th issue that gets a little confusing and hard to tell what the characters are talking about, who they are in the scene, and but other than that, I think it's great.
Cool. Mr. Adam?
I'm A- as well. I mean, this is really well written. It's interesting. The characters, as many as there are, they're still fleshed out. They're all unique personalities, and it completely and perfectly encapsulates the feeling of old Hollywood. And while we mentioned Hail Caesar, kind of the sunnier version of it, this shows that the seedy underbelly of kind of what we always kind of knew was going on in Hollywood, but this just kind of brings it out and shows that this is what it was really like especially if you were a female trying to get going, and how you had to be underhanded and do things that anything to get ahead. And in some ways, it's still that way now, but it's it seems like it was more rampant back then. I mean, now we just have like Harvey Weinstein fuckers like him. So,
yeah. Okay, Mr. Todd, what is your grade for writing?
I'm gonna give this a B+, A-. It was thoroughly engrossing. I loved it a lot. The one of the stated goals that Ed Brubaker had said earlier when he started doing this sort of thing is he was so burnt out on capes and tights, and
like chafe.
Right. I bet it does change.
Well, because he had gone from doing Batman for a few years to doing Captain America for many years.
But what this helps to showcase in such a way is comics as a medium and not the message. And a lot of people say, I'm reading comics, and they're thinking, you're reading about Wolverine and Superman. And though that's the most popular at this time, and one can argue the same for the film industry, that capes and tights are the most popular at this time. It can be so much more than that. And this shows that really well. So thank you, Ed.
Well, and to kind of add on to the popularity of the Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips books, in the letters, or in the kind of because he always does kind of his own little monthly musings in the back of the single issue. Mm-hmm. He had said in issue 2 of the Fade Out that issue 1 was their most ordered number 1 issue ever. Mm-hmm. And issue 2's orders were up 30% from that. Like their pre-orders. So,
right.
Which means a lot of people read it and said, holy shit, you need to read this.
That's right.
Cool. Mr. Maya, while you're saying that, what is your writing grade?
I'm at an A-. I think this is one of those where we all kind of have the same, it kind of hit us all the same way.
Yeah. And I'll sit there with an A- with everybody else. I'm going to go with a full A. I really liked it. I understand the issues with some of the confusion, but I can look past it. I really like that. So for art, for Sean Phillips and Elizabeth Breitweiser?
Breitweiser.
That's a bad thing to connect it with, but okay. Breitweiser. What is your grade, Mr. Maya?
I'm at an A. Sean Phillips hardly ever disappoints me, and I think as much as I like how his style fits the other books, like Criminal, I think it especially fits this setting, and I enjoyed it, especially when we get the actual like blackout scenes where the style changes, even though it's the same artist and looks like a different artist. It's still him and Elizabeth Breitweiser just changing their game.
Yeah, for sure. Mr. Adam.
I'm going to go with an A as well. I mean, this, I mentioned before, like just the way that the eyes is really cool. The coloring is fantastic, and it really has that dark, gritty feel of what you would expect 1940s Hollywood to be like. And it's gorgeous. I loved it. So everything Maya said as well.
Okay. Mr. Todd?
I love it. The coloring here, I really think they changed up from the previous one with this new colorist with Breitweiser. And the way she was able to fold in between flashbacks, between describing movies and thinking with thoughts, and how some of that coloring in the back is absent entirely, or you've got that Vaseline gauzy smear going on. I mean, that's really where the colorist comes in, is just singing. And it's so well done. It's just something that, anyone else who wants to be a colorist should study this, because it's fantastic. It's an A.
Fantastic. I'm also going to sit there with an A just because of peer pressure. I'm all about peer pressure.
Yes.
Mr. Jason, what is your grade?
Not to beat a dead horse, but it is also an A. It's just a really, really beautiful representation of the Hollywood glitz with those bright colors that unfortunately hide the dark underbelly that is real Hollywood.
Fantastic. Okay, so for overall grades for the entire book, what is your grade, Mr. Adam?
F. No, A-. I mean, this is a lot of fun. I love the fact that it's a limited series, and so you can pick up and get the rest of it for cheap, if not free. It's a quick read, too. I mean, it brings you in, and so the other night I was asking, like, hey, what's the book? Because I wanted to pick it up, and so I just went and downloaded it, and I looked up half an hour later, and I was like, oh, shit, I'm done. Like, it's interesting, it's fun, it's dark, it's gritty. It mixes in elements of, like, film noir while not quite being, fully under that label. And if you're a lover of, like, old Hollywood and just the movie industry in general, it's a dirty little love letter to that time period. So
cool. Mr. Maya, what is your grade?
I'm at an A. There isn't much I can say that hasn't already been said. This may There are parts of Criminal that I enjoy more, but not just Last of the Innocent, but just Criminal in general. But I think other Criminal aside, this may be my favorite Brubaker Sean Phillips book.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Jason.
An easy A, starring Emma Stone.
Oh, nice.
Up for an Oscar tonight.
Easy A?
Oh, yeah.
No, Emma Stone. Emma Stone and her titties.
Oh, yeah. Was it The Favorite?
The Favorite, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Mr. Todd.
This is also the Fawns, so it's an A.
Hey.
So, no, I really enjoyed this book. It's a whole lot of fun, and I recommend it all the time. So, yeah.
Cool. And I'm also at an A. I really love this book. It actually, not to argue with you, Mr. Maya, but I think it actually is probably my favorite Sean Phillips Brubaker book. But they keep coming out with great stuff all the time, so it's not like they've peaked.
I need to finish Kill or Be Killed, because that one's also way up there. I'm about halfway through the whole story, so that could change.
Kill or Be Killed, and I'm still very happy with it. But like rereading this book reminds me how much I really love this book. Like I remember the first time I read this book, and I was like, "Oh, holy shit, this is amazing!" And then I was so excited for every trade to come out so I could read it. So I really dug it. So that puts us at an overall GPA of 3.94. So that is just under an A. Yeah. It's a terrible, terrible book that you should never, ever, ever read. Next week.
Ever.
Yeah. Ever.
But before you go into next week, I do also want to point out that this book won 2 Eisner Awards, which are the comics equivalents of the Oscars or awards like that. In 2015, it won Best New Series, and in 2016, it won Best Limited Series. So we're not the only ones that liked it.
Yeah, there are a lot of other people who hated this book, clearly.
And speaking of the Oscars, so that is tonight. We're 2 hours when we record this. Black Panther is up, and everyone's saying it's probably not going to win. It's in the top 3 contender right now because
wow.
So the one that everyone's pretty sure is going to win is Roma. Green Street's up there, and then Black Panther, because Black Panther took home the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Ensemble, which is their version of Best Picture. Actors are the largest voting block in the Academy.
Yeah.
So as much as I still don't think it's going to win. I think it's going to go to hopefully Roma, because Green Book was a piece of shit. It'll be interesting, because if that wins, that's going to be a huge thing for Marvel and for geeks in general. I mean, of course, it'll piss off the geeks in their parents' basements because it has black people in it. But aside from that,
also, if it wins one thing, it needs to win costume.
It'll win costume. Costume is in the bag for it. But I'd be very, very happy to win Best Picture, because it was up there on my top 5 last year. It's no Spider-Verse, but
Spider-Verse is pretty bitchin', I gotta say.
If Spider-Verse doesn't win animated film, that'll also be a disappointment.
We're gonna burn the town down.
As much as I liked Incredibles 2, if they give it to that just because it's Pixar.
Well, what was really funny was
I think there's a lot of goodwill. I don't think it's going to get everything that it used to get. You know what I mean? There's a lot of competition now.
Incredibles 2 was good, but it wasn't
Spider-Verse.
But speaking of Spider-Verse, Caitlin Booth was at some kind of our friend, film critic. She's the editor-in-chief for Bleeding Cool. She was at, I think, was it a con or something like that? And there was like a question and answer with the people who did Spider-Verse. And then she's walking out and she's like, "Oh, hey, thanks for giving us Best Picture." Because film critics, we gave it Picture of the Year. Mm-hmm. So, and then our friend Jimmy was on a junket and interviewed the guys who worked on it. And they thanked him. So little Utah's getting a little bit of notice. So
nice. Sweet. Cool. So jumping back in, next week we are going to be doing Kill or Be Killed. That'll be our final book in our Brubaker Phillips month. And it's a book about a guy who is visited by a demon who basically says you need to kill one person every month, or I'm going to kill you. And so he decides that if he's going to have to kill somebody, he might as well kill bad people, and becomes a vigilante. So yeah, that's where that goes. So a little, it actually kind of, we didn't cover it this month, but it kind of has a similar vibe to Fatal, where it has sort of like this noir hybrid of noir and almost a little bit of horror to it as well. But, it's a fun book. I think we'll enjoy it. At least I hope everybody enjoys it. Who has recommendations they want to get off their chest?
I do.
What's your recommendation?
I've been trying to recommend this since I was in fucking Boise, and I had 1 megabit internet.
So where were you?
Fucking Boise.
Oh, okay.
So it was when I went through the second time, because I came back for the weekend. It was on sale on Comixology, and they're still on sale, but not as much. It was the new Darth Vader's comic series that was in 2017.
That Charles Soule wrote.
Yeah, it was 18 issues. I bought the first 3 because they were they're like $3 each. So it's the first Darth Vader series took place right after New Hope when he was trying to get back the Emperor's good graces for losing the Death Star. This one literally picks up the moment he comes off the table in Revenge of the Sith and is now Darth Vader in the suit and everything.
No!
I think actually it might be the very first time. But it's Anakin Skywalker trying to find a way to be Darth Vader in this new suit, and it delves into the lore like we've never seen before. Like I didn't know this, but actually it shows the prototype he was in the movie wasn't his final suit. He actually used the Force to create his own out of all these scrap pieces and stuff. It shows how a Sith gets their lightsaber and why it's red. And you actually in the end find out who his father is. So there actually was...
It wasn't an immaculate conception.
It wasn't, no. He was conceived through the Force, but it was he did have a father. So
also, the spoilers for that are littered over the internet. So if you don't want to be spoiled, don't don't Google anything about the series. Just pick it up.
And when it came out, I knew about that because I hadn't started reading it yet, and it was like in the headline on Google News. I'm like, you fuckers. But it's really cool. Darth Vader is probably my favorite fictional character of all time. And it's really interesting. It builds on the mythos of Star Wars in ways I hadn't seen before. And yeah, it's definitely check it out. It's really, really. I think I almost like it better than the last series they did. So
I will definitely check that out.
The first is on Comixology for free if you have unlimited, so you at least can check it out and see if you like it. So
that's the 2017 run.
Yeah.
That's what you were saying.
Yeah,
I think I actually own that in trade.
Yeah, because you were texting about it. You said you had it. So
yeah. I have all of the Star Wars comics on my hold, so I'm like, I have it.
Yeah, and if you like, they even tie stuff into Rebels. So if you like the Inquisitors and Rebels, it shows how Darth Vader gets a hold of them and makes them into his own team and like pretty much maims them all before because they were like basically Jedi in training who they weren't Sith. They just turned to the dark side, and so he trains them and stuff. And it's really, really cool. I like it a lot.
Cool. Mr. Todd, do you have any recommendations?
I do. So this past year, I'm trying to like Marie Kondo some of my life, if it sparks joy, keep it. I've had this big, huge pile of DVDs and movies and music and books and all these things that I haven't listened to in ages. And I'm going, I was faced with the question, do I get rid of this or is there a way that I can enjoy it? So what I've ended up doing is I bought some big like 250 disc CD books. And I threw out all of the cases to all of my music and all my DVDs and put it in there. But also on the flip side, I've looked into it. I've set up Plex Media Center on my home PC and set up a NAS there. And I have ripped the entirety of everything. And they've got apps for streaming sticks and phones on iOS and Android devices. And I have turned my own personal collection into a Netflix-like interface. And my upstream at my home is good enough because I pay too much money to the goddamn Comcast that it works well. So my wife and I, as we're just going through things, we're watching and looking at things more so than we've had in years because even though they were available, just sitting on the couch and going,
it's a lot easier.
I don't want to get up and hunt this out. It's you just go into Plex like, oh, I love this movie. Why haven't we watched this? And we start watching some of this stuff and it'll transcode on the fly. And I've got this big television and
must be nice.
It is nice. And it upscales it and everything else there. I haven't crunched it down. And even the 480p on the upscale on the TV looks really solid and looks great. So my music and movies and even photographs cobbled together from everywhere my wife's, it's all in one central location. All right. And it's awesome.
You can see the look he's giving right now.
And I could also second that it's cool because was it Gladiator you had pulled up on your phone right before we started recording? And it was
looks great.
Pretty solid video quality.
Yeah.
Mr. Meyer, what is your recommendation?
I have two recommendations. I did have one, and then I decided to add the second one based off a comment earlier. But first, a few episodes ago, I had recommended Young Justice by the new series by Brian Michael Bendis that DC's putting out under the Wonder Comics imprint, which is kind of more of a teen, I guess, themed imprint that Bendis had started. Well, since then, 2 more books have come out, and they have also been very good. The first one is called Naomi, which is by Bendis. We don't know much about the character. The first issue is still doesn't give us a whole lot, but there is a mystery going on with this new character, Naomi, who I feel could be his Miles Morales for DC, his new teen character that he's making for DC. And this mystery, I guess, is going to lead to something much bigger down the road. I can't really say much more than that because not a whole lot happened in the first issue, but I want to see where it goes. And the second issue is written by, is it Craig Russell, the guy that did Exit Stage Left and Flintstones? Mark Russell. He did, we got the first issue of Wonder Twins, and it is Zan and Jaina, and they're aliens, and Superman has set them up in a school, and they're going to like regular high school, but then they're also going to intern at the tower, not the Watchtower, the Hall of Justice after school, and some zany stuff happens, and that one's also a lot of fun. But the other recommendation, I blew through the majority of this on my recent trip to California, where I did see Brian and Jason. Hi. Good times, Universal and Disney. But I did read this whole omnibus while I was in California as well. I just picked up the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus Volume 1, which is probably like 2.5 to 3 years worth of Batman that he did.
Yeah, and was really good.
I had forgotten just how good that book is.
It's so much good.
And originally I had read it in single issues month to month, but it is so much better reading it as like one big trade.
So it's like epic and awesomely well written.
It is. I thought so.
Okay.
And that's not just a troll for Adam. I really did think that. The troll was me recommended it, but no, I legitimately think it's a lot of great stuff and a lot of great art from artists like Andy Kubert and J.H. Williams III and Tony Daniel.
Yeah.
What was the name of the main character in that book, the first one you recommended?
Naomi.
I moaned backwards.
Oh my God.
I knew you were going there. That's why I decided to play along.
That's why I love you, Adam.
Mr. Jason, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and recommend season 3 of HBO's True Detective. Similar to the story today for The Fade Out, it's got a main character who is a little bit of an unreliable narrator, either because he doesn't remember everything or doesn't want to. It may not be as good as season 1, but it's very engaging and unravels very methodically, and you cannot go wrong with Mahershala Ali. So I recommend it.
I've heard not as good as season 1, but loads better than season 2.
Yeah.
I mean, season 1 was so good, it might be its own worst enemy.
Very true. That's a good point.
Also, before we do leave, I did look up, I just happened to run across this. Ed Brubaker has a show that's set to premiere this year on Amazon Video called Too Old to Die Young.
Oh, I heard about
It's about a grieving police officer who, along with the man who shot his partner, finds himself in an underworld filled with working-class hitmen, Yakuza soldiers, cartel assassins sent from Mexico, Russian mafia captains, and gangs of teen killers. I'm in everything about it. Adam might not want to watch it because the lead is Miles Teller. And we all know how Adam feels about Miles Teller, but...
does he like or hate Miles Teller more than Grant?
I would love to have capture him and put him in a solid.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Throw him at the bottom of a well and put the lotion in the basket.
When he escapes all maimed and bloodied, he catches a really advanced form of cancer AIDS.
Okay.
Cancer AIDS.
AIDS. Yes. And kills him slowly over the rest of his lifetime. And yeah, I hate that fucker. He's a complete bitch.
Would you say he's an ankle?
Yes. He's below an ankle.
He's below. So Jason, so you don't know the term ankle is, my wife, Amy, hi Amy.
No, your wife, Amy, is not an ankle. You should specify how you phrase that.
Phrasing.
She worked in connections for a time, and she was called an ankle, and she's like, yeah, whatever. It's like, do you even know what that is? She's like, what? It's like, that's someone who's 3 feet beneath the cunt. And I'm like, that is amazing. And she's like, I had to turn around just to keep from smiling and laughing because that is so awesome. So I really like it. Like, oh, you're such an ankle. I'm like, that's fantastic. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that'll do it for this week, unless anybody else has anything else they want to throw out there. Do you?
I just love you guys.
I love you too. Happy to have everybody back.
Actually, I do have actually one last recommendation too. So it's a board game came out. It's called Western Legends, and everyone's pretty much familiar with Red Dead Redemption. Picture that, but a video game, a board game. So basically, you start out, you can be like Wyatt Earp, you can be Billy the Kid, you can be Annie Oakley, and you can literally do whatever you want. If you want to go play poker to get legend points, you can do that. You can go rob a train. You can go catch outlaws. You can go become an outlaw. You can go mine for gold, and it's a lot of fun. It's pretty easy to play, and it feels just like the board game version of Red Dead Redemption. So if you're a fan of that and you like board games or vice versa, I only played it once, but it's really, really cool.
Awesome. Well, then on that, we will say adieu. Join us next week for Kill or Be Killed as we finish up our Ed Brubaker month. And we will see you all later.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. Please rate us on whatever service you listen on. And remember, at least we're not cinema queens.